If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 7 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. This time-stamped email proves that this prediction that Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025 has been known since November 9th. We can see here the timestamp November 9th, 2024. On November 8th, 2024, we received the relevant prophetic signs related to Paul Simon. And as I wrote right here, God was pointing to November 8th ahead of time because Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. And this is the reason why Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. In short, the date 8:1 and 11:8 hint at Revelation 8:1 in the Bible, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. Paul Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence. As I wrote right here, it is exactly 38 weeks between November 8th and August 1st, 2025, and Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, for which 38 weeks hints at. A dirty bomb is a conventional explosive that uses radioactive material. I am predicting that 3 dirty bombs will explode in New York City, in Times Square, Penn Station, and Grand Central Station. There will then be a massive evacuation from Manhattan Island. I am predicting that these 3 dirty bombs will explode on either August 30th or September 4th. I am also predicting that a dirty bomb will explode in the port of Los Angeles on September 4th. I am predicting that Tehran, Iran, will be nuked by the US or possibly Israel on September 7th, 2025. This will obviously be in response to the dirty bombs that are predicted to explode in New York City. I am predicting that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom will die in a plane crash in St. Louis as they are traveling from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in Busch Stadium in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028. This will be during the predicted presidential campaign of Gavin Newsom. As a result of Gavin Newsom's death, Michelle Obama will become the Democrat Party's presidential nomination. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the 5th trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029. And it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. On September 11th, 2029, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. This video was put together today. Today is July 29th, and we have these signs here that are astounding, and this was just put together in the last couple of hours. And so I'm just going to do the best that I can. I'm confident that more light will come to what I will be talking about in the days ahead. But for right now, we have to get this documented into a video because of this connection here of 3 days, which is very important. And that's because Paul Simon's third song on the album Sound of Silence, the third song released. The third hit single released from the album Sound of Silence was the song I Am a Rock. And we would figure that at some point, I would have figured, at some point, God would use the song I Am a Rock in his prophetic big picture of signs, and he has done so right at the last minute, just 3 days ahead of his death, predicted death, Paul Simon. Incidentally, that's interesting too because of the 3 days, 3 nights in the Bible, Jesus's time in the grave, for example. And that's because the rock in the Bible is symbolism for Jesus. We have this metaphor and theme of a rock in the Old Testament, and it is symbolism for Jesus. And also in the Old Testament, God told Moses his name and said that his name is I Am. And so God has cleverly played on this. I am God, a rock, Jesus. I am Jesus. God is Jesus. This is astounding. Now, so the sound of silence couldn't be more relevant here, because that's the main reason why Paul Simon will die, or is predicted to die, on August 1st. It's because of Revelation 8:1 and the description of a period of silence in heaven, which is then followed by the trumpet judgments of destruction. And that's why we have these connections here after the predicted death of Paul Simon. In other words, Paul Simon's death will be a warning from God of the trumpet judgments that are described after Revelation 8:1. But I'll get into these connections in a second. What we need to talk about here is what happened today, July 29th, 2025. Now, Simon's death on the date 8/1, the first day of the 8th month, will point to Revelation chapter 8. And his death will also point to Amos chapter 8. Amos 8:1, the first verse of the 8th chapter of the book of Amos, the prophet in the Bible, describes a basket of summer fruit. And baskets of summer fruit appear in the latter weeks of the summer season, and which includes August 1st. So in other words, this is the time of year for baskets of summer fruit. Now, how do we know that God is pointing to Amos chapter 8? Because of the basket of summer fruit. Well, that's because of the death of Wally Amos, the founder of famous Amos cookies, who was the agent that first signed Simon and Garfunkel to a record label. And he died, Wally Amos, at the age of 88. Last year, on the very prophetic in the Hebrew calendar date, the 9th of Av. The last chapters of the book of Amos are the 8th and 9th chapters, and so famous Amos, which hints at the prophet Amos, died at 88 on the 9th of Av, this important date regarding the loss and restoration of Israel. What I mean is that the theme of the Bible, the Old Testament, is the relationship between God, the Jews, and their land. And the first and second temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av, as well as all of the major calamities in history symbolically began on the 9th of Av, which I won't explain here. I've explained it in other videos. And what I have also explained in other videos is that it is through these, and so the 8th and 9th chapters, to finish that, the 8th and 9th chapters of the book of Amos regard the Jews being warned by God that they are about, that their nation is about to be destroyed. But at the end of the 9th chapter, God speaks of the restoration, the final restoration of Israel at the end of the age. And so that's why, again, Amos, famous Amos, Wally Amos, who signed Simon and Garfunkel, died at the age of 88 on the 9th of Av. On that 9th of Av, incidentally, last year, 9 Jews were arrested for protesting Israel's military on the I-405 in California. They shut down the highway. 45 is the 9th triangular number. So anyway, we had prophetic signs anyway, is my point, on this 9th of Av date in the Jewish calendar. Okay, and so, but also all of this ultimately points to Amos chapter 1. And that chapter has 15 verses, which is why Paul Simon's most recent album, produced 7 Psalms, was instructed to Simon to produce through a voice in a prophetic dream that Simon recorded as occurring on the date 115, January 15th, as in Amos chapter 1 with 15 verses. Also, the release of that album is exactly 115 weeks before Simon's predicted death, which also 115 hints at Amos 1 with its 15 verses. Okay? Now, the thing about Amos chapter 1 with its 15 verses is that there is a repeating Hebrew idiom, quote, for 3 transgressions and for 4, unquote. This idiom means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been reached, and now judgment and destruction is unavoidable. That's what the idiom means. But the reason why this is relevant is because in this theme, big picture of signs, God has associated Paul Simon with this theme of a door, which is the same metaphor as a bridge, and Simon's biggest hit was bridge over troubled water. All right? And the door is symbolized by the number 4 in God's signs. And so for 3 transgressions and for 4. Now, what could be put into this diagram is a 4 days connection from the 4 deaths that occurred in the Manhattan Tower in the shooting in New York City on July 28th, the day before this day. So we have a 3 days and 4 days. In other words, for 3 transgressions and for 4. The thing about the shooting in the tower is that the shooter killed himself and ended up on the 33rd floor, and he killed 4 people. That's another for 3 transgressions and for 4. He was also using an M4 style of assault rifle, and also the tower is located at 345 Park Avenue. 345 is 115 plus 115 plus 115. And God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. So it's the 33rd floor in an address that hints at the number 3 through its repetition of 115. As I just explained, the number 115 is relevant to Paul Simon, as I just explained, because of Amos chapter 1 with its 15 verses. But we again have this repetition of 3 times of this number and the 33rd floor. Now, the reason why it was on Park Avenue is because of the extremely prophetic Central Park reunion concert with Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. Okay? And so, in other words, there's way more to the signs on July 28th, including this shooting, which is why it isn't in this diagram, because that can't be covered today or even in a few days. So, but I gave you enough information that's relevant to this diagram, so you can imagine that, right? We have a 4-day connection from the 4 deaths, and he ended up on the 33rd floor. Anyway, we have 3 transgressions and for 4. But what about this 3 days connection here? And again, this 3 days connection is relevant because we are talking about the predicted death of Paul Simon, who will die on this date because of the Sound of Silence album, because again, Revelation 8:1, as in the date 8:1, speaks of the sound of silence in heaven. And the 3rd song released from the album is I Am a Rock. Do we have any rock signs 3 days prior to Simon's predicted death? Well, yes, we do. All right, I just want to edit in something to the video that I already produced here. And I want to add that the 3rd song played at the prophetic reunion concert in Central Park was I Am a Rock. Okay, so not only was I Am a Rock the 3rd released single from the Sound of Silence album, but it was the 3rd song played at the prophetic Central Park reunion concert and received very positive reception after them playing the song. And this ties into this sign here, again, because the shooter ended up on the 33rd floor in the and killed himself with an M4 type of style of assault rifle. That's a 3 and a 4. In other words, again, for 3 transgressions and for 4. And we get the phrase, the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4, from the book of Amos chapter 1, which has 15 verses. And God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And the number 115 is repeated 3 times in the address of the building that the shooter shot 4 people and killed 4 people in, and ended up on the 33rd floor. And that address was 345, in other words, 3 times 115, at Park Avenue, which hinted at Central Park. And it's a repetition of 3, and he ended up on the 33rd floor. And I Am a Rock was the 3rd song played at the Central Park reunion concert. Now, the thing is, the sound of silence, again, Paul Simon will die on the date 8-1 because it will point to Revelation 8-1 in the description of a period of silence in heaven. And I Am a Rock is the 3rd song from the Sound of Silence album. But the song Sound of Silence was originally released with the first album, the original acoustic version of Sound of Silence. The acoustic version didn't become popular, and one of the producers remade the song with electric guitar and sounds, and then it became a #1 hit. So then they released another album named Sound of Silence with the new version. But the original version of Sound of Silence is on the first Simon and Garfunkel album, which is titled Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. And this is profound because Wednesday is the 4th day of the week. Wednesday morning 3 a.m. hints at for 3 transgressions and for 4. And like I am saying and describing here, this 3 days connection and 4 days connection gives us a hint at for 3 transgressions and for 4. And it connects to the date Simon is predicted to die on 8-1 because of the Sound of Silence, which was originally released on the album that hints at for 3 transgressions and for 4, Wednesday morning 3 a.m. All right, in a minute, I will explain this rock connection, 3 days, this prophetic sign involving rock on this date. But let me just correct something. The Google AI said that I Am a Rock was the 3rd song played at the concert, the reunion concert, but that's an error. It must be referring to another concert. However, it has been learned that Simon's 3rd solo album contains the song hit single She Loves Me Like a Rock, or maybe it's just Loves Me Like a Rock. So that's another 3 and a rock. Okay, that's amazing. Simon's 3rd solo album contains a hit song, Loves Me Like a Rock. And also, God has pointed to the lyrics of this song, which I'll just now show. All right, by the way, this song reached #2 on the Billboard chart and was kept from the #1 position by another artist that God has used in his prophetic signs, Cher, and her song Half Breed. And it's interesting that the song is named Half Breed, given that I believe the lyrics of this song point to the Antichrist, and who is Satan's representative. And so, in a way, the Antichrist is half Satan, half man. I don't know. That's just a theory I have. But what's interesting, though, is the lyrics of this song from the third album. And the song, again, is Loves Me Like a Rock. Okay, so Simon says here, and the devil would call my name. Okay, here we have the lyric again, the devil would call my name. I'd say, now, who do you think you're fooling? I'm a consummated man. I can snatch a little purity. My mama loves me. She loves me. Okay, so she loves me like a rock. She rocks me like the rock of ages and loves me. Okay, so we know the symbolism of rock being in the Bible, Jesus, but here we have this Antichrist, because the Antichrist will claim to be God, and here we have something interesting in these lyrics here. I'll read from starting here. And if I was president, the minute Congress call my name, I'd say, now, who do you think you're fooling? I've got the presidential seal. I am up on the presidential podium. My mama loves me. She loves me. She gets down on her knees and hugs me. She loves me like a rock. Now, I don't really know what Paul Simon is actually referring to here, but my guess is that the symbolism here is that, Paul Simon, or his character in this song, can get away with murder, can get away with sin, because his mother loves him. But that's why we've got the devil talking to this guy in the song, and but he's invoked the president here. That's very interesting. In this, regardless of what the actual meaning of Paul Simon is here in the song, is his intended meaning, we do have the combination of president and devil in this prophetic song, which is obviously prophetic because it is the third solo album, and the song is Loves Me Like a Rock. And as I'm explaining here, Paul Simon's third song from the Sound of Silence album is I Am a Rock. And Paul Simon is predicted to die 3 days after this rock sign on July 29th, which I'll explain. But I've already mentioned the earthquake, which is rocks, tectonic plates. So, in other words, we have clearly a hint at the Antichrist, who will be the president. That's clear here. Who, by the way, is the 44th president. And that makes this another 3 and a 4, come to think of it. Because if this is about the Antichrist prophetically, I'm not saying Paul Simon thinks it is, but God thinks it is. We've got the devil and the president here, and the devil trying to fool the president or something to that effect here, or the president fooling people. The president is the Antichrist, the 44th president, and this is the third solo album. That's another for 3 transgressions and for 4, which is the reason for the Antichrist being the president of America. It's judgment on the nation. And again, the idiom means, the Hebrew idiom for 3 transgressions and for 4 means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment, destruction is unavoidable, and hence the 44th president. Now, speaking of the 44th president and reunion concerts, I will add this. This is from Wikipedia. Simon and Garfunkel had another reunion tour in Europe that was 4 plus 4 days, or concerts, and it was a 9-month tour, and so the 44th president was inaugurated in 2009, but prophetically, this European tour, which ended, by the way, not just the European tour, but also the North American tour that preceded it in 2003 and 2004, which was a big deal, this reunion tour. Okay, and so it was a true reunion tour, and it ended at the Colosseum in Rome, which is very profound and prophetic, because the headquarters of the first of the two antichrists, Pope Francis, who will be resurrected in 2029 and will rule from the headquarters in the Vatican in Rome. It's very clear from Bible prophecy. And the big thing about the city of Rome is the Colosseum, in which Christians were persecuted at the beginning of the age. That's what the Colosseum is known for. If you visit the Colosseum, there's a huge cross in it commemorating this. This is where the Christians were fed to the lions, in the Colosseum, for sport, for show. Now, that's important in God's signs, because things return full circle at the end of the age, when Rome once again will persecute true Christians. Because the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians are not Christians. Not really. And if they are, their faith will be tested and they will prove to be, but currently they aren't. And that's the purpose of the end times and the Antichrist, is to test the faith of these quote-unquote Christians that aren't really Christians, including the vast majority of Catholics, which is why the Antichrist is a pope. It is to, like I'm saying, test the faith of these quote-unquote Christians that are Catholic, that aren't really Christian, to finally make a decision as to whether or not they will continue to follow this pagan religion or do away, and as the Bible prophecy says, come out of her, my people. And so anyway, that's what will happen. There will be a persecution of true Christians by other quote-unquote Christians, including Catholics. And so anyway, at the end of the age, Rome will persecute true Christians again. This concert exceeded the prophetic reunion concert in Central Park, because the reunion concert in Central Park at the time was a record, and God uses records in general for his signs. It was 500,000, and this concert attracted 600,000, which hints at 666, the number of the Antichrist. Now, what's interesting is that this Colosseum concert on July 31st, 2004, was exactly 44 plus 44 plus 44 weeks before the 44th President Obama announced he would run for the White House on February 10th, 2007, and the White House has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, which is amazing. That's the connection here. 44 plus 44 plus 44 weeks before Obama announced he would run for the mansion in Washington, D.C. that has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms. This location of the mansion is also at 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue, and Pennsylvania is the second state, and so that 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue, second state, hints at the second presidency for the 44th president. So anyway, we've got this connection here from the Colosseum to prove that Obama is the Antichrist, the 44th president. But what about this 3 days connection here? And again, this 3 days connection is relevant because we are talking about the predicted death of Paul Simon, who will die on the state because of the Sound of Silence album, because again, Revelation 8:1, as in the date 8:1, speaks of the sound of silence in heaven. And the third song released from the album is I Am a Rock. Do we have any rock signs 3 days prior to Simon's predicted death? Well, yes, we do. First of all, to establish this, we have this 8.8 magnitude earthquake. That's a very rare occurrence, 8.8. It's one of the strongest earthquakes in recorded history. This 8.8 magnitude earthquake lasted for 8 minutes. One of the interesting things about this earthquake is that it lasted for so long. It was 8 minutes, and the earthquake magnitude was 8.8. That is because it is prophetic. God has confirmed the prophetic significance of this 8.8 earthquake by having it last for 8 minutes, because this gives us 888. 888 is the numeric value of the name Jesus in Greek gematria. So the name Jesus in Greek is equal to in Greek gematria, because Greek letters, like Roman letters, are also letters or numbers. And so the numeric value of the name Jesus is 888, which is why God in general uses repetitions of 3/8 or 888 in his signs. And also, Jesus, for that matter, when asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his return, mentioned the metaphor of earthquake signs. It's not like all signs are going to be earthquakes, but the first thing he mentioned was earthquakes. This is a second coming of Lord Jesus Christ earthquake sign. It's an 888, which means Jesus. But more than that, what does it mean? And here's the thing that the other majority of watchers, people interested in prophetic signs, miss and don't appreciate, is that the full intended meaning of any of God's prophetic signs cannot be properly or fully understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs, including, for example, the other signs that occurred on the same date, which I'll explain in a second, but the connections as well, which I'll explain. And so again, none of God's prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. It's the same as the Bible. The Bible cannot be appreciated or understood without appreciating and understanding the connections to the other parts of the Bible. And it isn't a linear document, it is infinitely connected with itself. Everything is interconnected in the Bible. And so that's the same with God's prophetic signs, his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And that will be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. The predicted death of Paul Simon, 3 days after the 3/8 here. And Paul Simon's death, again, will point to Revelation chapter 8. And also the third song released from the Sound of Silence album, hence the 3 days. In other words, this is how I know the prediction ahead of time. Now, again, I have known the prediction that Paul Simon will die on August 1st since November of 2024. But, all right, now, again, Jesus in the Old Testament is symbolized by rock. An earthquake is a movement of rock. And this earthquake again pointed to Jesus through it being 8.8 and lasting 8 minutes. And Jesus is rock. And so we have this 3 days connection to the death of Simon, whose third song on the album Sound of Silence is I Am a Rock. Okay, and so we have this earthquake. Now, what was the prophetic significance of this earthquake besides 8.8, hinting at Revelation 8 and Amos 8 3 days later with Simon's predicted death? Well, as a result of the earthquake that was near Japan, that sent tsunamis to Japan, we had the evacuation of the workers at the Fukushima nuclear power plant who are working there in the aftermath of the tsunami in 2011. What's the coincidence, which makes it not a coincidence and a prophetic sign, is that the day before, it was reported that the Fukushima cleanup will be delayed and take 12 to 15 years. I forget or don't know what the prior estimate was for the amount of cleanup time, but the news story, it was reported, or rather declared or stated officially in an official report, that the cleanup was going to take longer than expected. And that was like the day before this evacuation at the Fukushima plant. And that, in other words, means that God is pointing to the cleanup news. Why is he pointing to the cleanup news? Well, because God is also pointing to these predictions, which are dirty bomb explosions in New York City and Los Angeles. And a dirty bomb is a conventional bomb made of radioactive material, as in Fukushima. There will be evacuations, as in the evacuation of the Fukushima workers. And for that matter, people in Japan because of the tsunami threat due to the earthquake. Okay, and so, but the destructive thing about a dirty bomb is not the number of people it will kill, but the cleanup afterwards and the potential of shutting down the location for a long period of time. A dirty bomb in the right location could wreak billions of dollars of damage because of the required cleanup and the psychological fear of returning to that location. Whether it is justified or not, people will not want to return, and there'll need to be this thorough cleanup, which could take years. And so if you put the dirty bomb in the correct place, like I believe God is pointing to, for example, the port of Los Angeles, this could be devastating. Or Penn Station or Grand Central Station in New York City, for example. Okay? Now, I'll get to that in a second. Well, anyway, this 8.8 earthquake is 888 hours before this prediction right here, just to get that out of the way, I suppose. Now, so along with this connection that obviously points to Paul Simon because of the 3 days and his third song from Sound of Silence and Revelation chapter 8, we have the 8.8 magnitude earthquake and 3 days connection. Okay, third song, Revelation 8. But what also occurred, and earthquakes are when rocks slide, the tectonic plates are rocks and they slide against each other. But on this day, we also have an amazing thing happened. We have a post on Instagram from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who goes by the nickname The Rock, this famous actor who was also a wrestler, not a real wrestler, but the show wrestler, professional wrestler. And incidentally, we had the recent death of Hulk Hogan, which I wouldn't be surprised if it connects to this rock sign here. Well, anyway, no, maybe not. But anyway, but the post is astounding beyond words. In fact, it's speechless, pun intended, as in Sound of Silence, because the post is of The Rock and his 2 young daughters under the age of 10, putting ridiculously and a ridiculous amount of makeup all over The Rock's head and bald face and bald head. And he's just sitting there. And while he's just sitting in there and the girls are doing this, laughing uncontrollably, The Rock has put music to this post, this video, and it is of Simon and Garfunkel and the Sound of Silence. And that is also in Instagram posted. The names of Simon and Garfunkel and Sound of Silence appear in The Rock's Instagram post. That's amazing. And by the way, all of this diagram was pretty much already known. All of this other stuff involving The Rock, this was already known. And this was like the last thing to be learned regarding all of this. And we already knew this earthquake, for example, connected to 3 days, but then a friend of mine, I guess, did a Google search for The Rock on this date to see if there was anything in the news. And sure enough, there was a news story regarding The Rock because of this post that he made of his daughters putting makeup on him and this song, Sound of Silence. And that's just so amazing because we have this 3 days connection to the I Am a Rock death of Paul Simon prophetic sign And it's the third song from the Sound of Silence album. Okay. Now, further confirmation. We had the tsunami warning and evacuations in Hawaii, and the area code of Hawaii is 808. The tsunamis were a result of the 8.8 earthquake, which just is more confirmation that we are connecting this to the predicted death of Paul Simon, which will point to Revelation 8 and Amos 8 on the first day of the 8th month. Okay? Now, also, the governor of Hawaii has been used in his signs before because of the Maui fire on the date 8/8 in 2023. Okay, another 8/8 for you. But Josh, because of the book of Joshua and the walls of security collapsing on Jericho, that was a result of an earthquake. Archaeology proves this. And the last name of this governor is Green. And green is the fourth color of the rainbow. And again, the number 4 is associated with Paul Simon and his signs because of this bridge and door theme symbolism, as I explained. The reason for I didn't actually explain, I don't think, the reason for why the number 4. And that's because of one of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence in heaven, which is the 5th trumpet, and it describes the demons in the bottomless pit crossing over a bridge or through a door that's unlocked with a key, and music compositions are dependent on music keys, and Simon is a music composer, and they will cross the bridge and through the door that's unlocked with the key and into the earthly realm. That's one of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence. And that's why green, it's the number 4. And the connection to Paul Simon with the door bridge symbolism. Okay, so how this was discovered, my friend also discovered this. 88 days prior to the 8.8 earthquake was the birthday of The Rock, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. His birthday was 53, but 53 is the 8 plus 8th prime number. And that's how God signs works. We know this because I have been studying his big picture of signs from morning until night for more than full-time hours for more than 7 years. And so God uses prime numbers, but he can break it down into an 8 plus 8th prime number. That's how it works. It's also, incidentally, a 4 times 4th prime number, and that's also relevant. Also, the inverse of 53, which is relevant, in other words, 1 divided by 53, is 0.0188, as in 88, but also because of God using this number repeatedly, and that's because of the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe, exclamation mark, which is part of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence in heaven. The word woe, exclamation mark, is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. And again, extreme judgment from God will occur after the initial warning with the sound of silence prophetic sign, which is predicted to be Paul Simon's death on August 1st. Now, what's amazing here and what really confirms it all of this connection, is that on this same day, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock announced that they would be making a 3rd movie together. That's a confirmation of the 3 days to the death of the singer who composed the song, the 3rd song from the album Sound of Silence. This is relevant because of the movie Speed, their first movie together, which is a prophetic sign that God has used to communicate the coming dirty bomb in the port of Los Angeles. But that will be explained in another video. Okay, now, another thing that confirms everything here is that, well, first of all, let's go here. The movie that The Rock starred in, which involves an earthquake, again, The Rock posted this on the day of the earthquake, the 8.8 earthquake. This movie called San Andreas is about calamity. It's apocalyptic. It's about the San Andreas earthquake that might happen. Anyway, The Rock starred in this movie exactly 122 months prior to this rock prophetic sign. And 122 is the 41st semi-prime number, which is a number that is only divisible by two other prime numbers. And the word key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. And again, the key opens the door to the bottomless pit. Simon is associated with this because it follows the trumpet judgment. This is part of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence in heaven. Also, music is made with music keys. And also, Simon was born in 1941. Okay, which is again the equivalent of the word key in gematria. Okay, now let's see. So we have this too, which is that the birth of Simon, Paul Simon, his birth on the date 41, on the 13th of the month. 41 is the 13th prime number. And it's 30 years and 202 days to the birth of The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. This is relevant because God is repeating this number 322 or combinations of 3 and 22 for symbolism to point to Genesis 3:22, which is the verse God is using for symbolism for what is coming when the demons cross over into the earthly realm over the bridge. They will promise people who take the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing. And incidentally, that's what The Rock takes. You don't get to be as big as The Rock without taking things. In other words, pointy things that put things inside people is what I mean by the thing. That is the mark of the Antichrist. And you don't get, so The Rock symbolizes that. Right? That's clear, right? That should be clear. That The Rock obviously gets to, The Rock is famous because of his size. Let's just be frank. The Rock is a huge man, and he is famous because of his size, okay? And so he's known for, not like admitted to it, I don't think, but I'm sure he takes the thing, he puts things inside him, and that's symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which is begins with an MR and ends with NA thing, okay? And this promise that through the thing and altering one's chromosomes, that one can achieve immortality without God, is what God is pointing to through Genesis 3:22. Because this alludes to the first lie ever told by the serpent to Eve in the garden, which is that she shall surely not die, and this being without God, despite disobeying God, whatever. That the end lie, the last lie of the age, will be the same lie that began the age. And this date here symbolizes this, 3:22 in 2029. And we have a prediction for this date. On this date, it is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition, the Virgin Mary, on the beach in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. That's another story, which I'll cover in other videos. And so, but the point is that we have this rock sign that connects to this rock sign, and then this connection to the Mary sign, or rather, I should say, the 3:22 date. And again, the rock was born 30 years and 202 days after Simon was born, and we are connecting the rock to the predicted death of Paul Simon. Hopefully that's clear. Now, just to explain this connection, this is 1,333 days, and that number is the 390th semi-prime number. And 390 is 130 plus 130 plus 130. And so in other words, this number here and its semi-prime number hint at the number 13. And Revelation chapter 13 speaks of the two antichrists and the beast that rises out of the sea onto the sand, onto the beach, and that's why the Mary apparition will occur on the beach in Rio. Okay, well, anyway. (133) is the 44th semi-prime number. That could hint at that. We have a 4 weeks, 4 days connection to the predicted bombs in New York City on a Saturday night. Paul Simon is associated with Saturday Night Live in his career. All right, he actually sung on Saturday Night Live right after 9/11, for example. He opened the show with his song "The Boxer." All right, and from the 8.8 earthquake and the evacuations in the 808 state, it is 888 hours, which is the equivalent of 37 days, which hints at 3 sets of 7. And the earthquake collapsed the walls of security in Jericho after the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7. Anyway, that gets us to the predicted dirty bombs in New York City and the port of LA. Now, in the account of the flood in the Bible, the flood waters increased for 40 days. So 40 days after these tsunamis in which the flood waters increased, we have this date, this prediction here, September 7th, which is when it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran or Damascus. They've already bombed Iran, I think this will be a nuke. On September 7th, we could see Israel use a nuke on either or both of these cities. And that's the reason for the Fukushima. I should have mentioned this. Yeah, the Fukushima is involved in this because of the predicted dirty bombs and the cleanup from the radioactive material, but also its symbolism for nuclear bombs, as is Japan, because Fukushima is in Japan, and God uses, in general, Japan signs to symbolize the nuclear bombs that were dropped there. And so we could see a nuclear bomb used on this day, 40 days later, which would be amazing because Fukushima was originally devastated by a tsunami, floodwaters, and then we have this other Fukushima sign with floodwaters just right after the cleanup sign at Fukushima, and that's 40 days, and that's extremely relevant because of the increasing floodwater sign, the tsunami, which is the result of rocks underwater. It gives us 40 days to the predicted September 7th, Israel, Iran, Damascus date. Okay. So I think I've explained this side now. One last thing I think to explain is this connection. And that's this 5.2 earthquake in Newport, as in portal. And the word door, which is the same symbolism as a portal, the demons will cross through a portal or through a door to the earthly realm. The word door is equal to 52 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. So that's why the 5.2 in Newport in Los Angeles. Los Angeles means or hints at fallen angels. And this earthquake was felt during a baseball game in Los Angeles, which means the game is prophetic in some way, and this is how it is. First of all, it's the Dodgers. God is using the Dodgers in so many different ways in general, other signs, including this guy who plays for the Dodgers, number 5, Freeman, 5.2 earthquake, and in the game, he hit his 500th double, which hints at 52, 5 and 2, double, right? 500 and double hints at 52. And God uses records for signs. He, with this double, is the player who has the most doubles of any active player. Not in history, but of any active player, current player. Freeman is symbolism because of the Antichrist and the persecution of God's people, and on and on. Well, this connection here, from this earthquake to this earthquake, from the 5.2, and again, the rock, this, in other words, establishes this, or is a second witness to the connection from the date 5.2, this 5.2 earthquake in Los Angeles, and the rock lives in Los Angeles. Okay? It's 11 months and 23 days, which hints at 1,123, the 188th prime number. As I mentioned, that hints at woe, exclamation mark, in the Bible, used in the context of extreme judgment from God. Okay. And I think that's it for this diagram. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, "Jesus loves you," unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.